Hello, I'm Ludmila Golovine, and welcome to the podcast Language Matters. We are today very grateful to have on our podcast our recent guest and a panelist on our Wellness Connection event, A Journey to Open Heartedness, Pastor Juanita Rasmus. Thank you, Juanita, for joining us today.
Hey, what a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, wanted to ask you first on we had some great conversations during that event. I wanted to ask you, how did you start on your journey? How did you get to where you are at today? How did you become a pastor, a speaker, a writer?
Well, I tell you, I never set out to be either of those things. Maybe perhaps a speaker, but when I was in high school, I always thought I would end up being an attorney. And the reason was that I wanted to be able to stand before a group of people and convince them to think the way I did about something, right? And so that didn't happen. I ended up working with my father in his insurance business. And after about 7 years or so, and having gotten married and becoming a mom, I felt as though I was literally being called into a new space. And that was the space of being a pastor. And it happened that my pastor at the time gave us some opportunities to teach Bible study and to preach a few times, and the passion just grew. All of a sudden, I knew I was in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And no doubt many of those who are listening in your audience could say the same thing. I knew this is where I was supposed to be. And so really, that's how the journey started. I was given an opportunity. I stepped into it with my whole heart, and I found it was the place for me to be.
Oh, wow. What an amazing story.
Thank you.
And just like many of the language professionals face the same challenge when we work with very difficult situations, sometimes human trafficking encounters, sometimes situations that are end of life at a hospital, courts, child protective services. So very difficult, traumatizing situation. Probably as a pastor, you come across same type of challenges that people come to you with.
Absolutely.
So you talked about reframing perceptions, right, as a way of dealing with that. So how can we, as language professionals, reframe our perception when we're in the middle of a difficult situation?
Yeah, that's a good one. Perception is the key. I love your glasses because glasses help us to have an ability to see, right? And each of us comes with our own prescription of how we see. And so one of the things that I find that's sometimes helpful is to ask myself in that situation, what is the stressful thing for me? What is the stressful thought for me? What is the stressful idea? All right. Maybe it's the fact that here I am working with someone who's talking to me about having been molested as a child. Right. And so then my own issues come up that connect to that. And so what I find myself doing is having to take a moment to step away. And sometimes you can't do it in the moment, but you can make a mental note. When I get a break, I'm going to take a moment and do this process. And so one of those steps is to ask yourself the belief that you have around this. Is it true? And then you might say, well, absolutely, what I'm believing that's causing me stress around this is absolutely true. Then you might say to yourself, the second question being, how would you know that it's true? And so then you answer and you might say, well, I've got evidence. Here's everything we're hearing. It's saying that this is true. Then the third question is to ask myself, who would I be without that thought? You see, most of the time, what's affecting our perceptions is what we're believing. Oh, that was a terrible thing. This is horrible. And so when we label things like terrible and horrible, and yes, there are some very terrible things that happen in our world, but if we look at our own lives, we know that even the most horrible, terrible things have a seed of good in them. And so perception is about learning to look for the good. In the moment, sometimes that can be very difficult. But when we pull away and give ourselves an opportunity to reflect, we can ask ourselves, so who would I be without this thought about how bad this is? Then I might say, I would be a pastor sitting here being fully present, listening with an open heart to just help hold the space for this person in front of me. As an interpreter, very much the same thing. You can define and create a perception of how you want to be in a situation. We can choose to ignite our autonomic nervous system and go into fight, flight, freeze, right? Or we can choose to say, I'm going to stay open. I'm going to be a conduit. I don't have to contain this pain, these feelings, all of this information. I don't have to hold that in me. I don't have to contain it. I can be a conduit, let it flush through me so that I can stay open to be present to the person or persons who are before me. So the third question is, who would I be without that thought that's creating stress for me? Then the fourth question is this, for us to ask ourselves, give ourselves permission to change the thought. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh my God, this is terrible. I can change that thought to, how might I see something good out of this? How might there be something transformative out of this? How might there be something that we're not even seeing that could work for good, that could work for change? You know, one of the things I had the experience of is having, in 30 years of pastoring, I've heard just about some of everything. And I didn't recognize the impact of the transformational effect of other people's trauma on me, right? And so one of the things I recognized is that I needed a safe place, a therapist, a spiritual director, in my case, two people who helped me to be able to clear myself, clear my perception, because you can hear so much negative or what we believe to be negative that we'll end up feeling like the world is a terrible place. In reality, the world is not a terrible place. The world is a very redeeming place. And we see it especially in nature.
Well, so if we're not even, let's say the situation is so challenging that we're not even able to see anything good in the moment.
Sure.
But just that thought of going, what would I be without that thought, right?
That's right.
And if I just move that thought and I'm present there in empathy with the person, holding space for them, creates a situation of an open heart.
That's right.
And can you tell us more, when you're not even talking, can we feel somebody else's open heart? And how does it affect the environment?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Oh, I'm so glad you said that. Well, you know, one of the practices that I do with people is to invite, say in a large group. I will, matter of fact, we just did this Saturday at an event that we were speaking at. And so what we did was we divided the group in half, and we had group A to hold an experience of joy in their heart, a memory of joy. Maybe it was the joy of when you walk home and your dog's wagging its tail and can't wait to see you, right? Or maybe it was a childhood memory of a grandparent lovingly being present. But I ask everybody in group A to remember an experience of joy and to hold that, right? All the people in group B, I asked them to hold the thing that's been most stressful to them recently. And so whatever it is, maybe it's relationship, or maybe it's finances, whatever the issue is. So we asked group B to hold those feelings around what's stressing them. Then we partnered A with a B person, right? We asked partner A to simply hold the joy and imagine being a conduit, that joy goes straight out of them and into the other person. It is amazing what people say to me. I remember one person said, I didn't even want to do that exercise, right? And they said, but I found myself loosening up inside. I found myself, they were the person who was holding the pain. They said, I found myself feeling more open, more spacious. It was as though the problem that I had been holding in me, as though I was to contain that problem, right? It was like the top kind of came off of it. And so I kind of came out of the jar that I had put myself in. So yes, scientists have shown, Dr. Larry Dossey, who's a physician, did some research on what happens when we hold good intention. And his idea of holding those good intentions was called prayer. When people held good intentions of prayer for people who had just had open heart surgery, the group that was getting prayer, and they didn't know because it was a blind study, the group that was getting prayer recovered faster than the group who had not been receiving prayer. And so, yes, we know it affects not only us as the person holding the space with joy, with light, with love, however it is that we connect to the greater good within ourselves, right? When we stay open to that, it not only affects us, but it affects what we put our eyes on. So when we see that child, when we see that patient, when we see that adult who's in a difficult situation, and we stay open to love flowing through us, get a memory of love and being loved, get a memory of joy, get a memory of a time of peace, get a memory even of being in your favorite place. My husband is a beach guy, so whenever he's stressed, I say, go to the beach in your mind. And you can, because you've got memories of that and you can pull on them. And so, yes, it can not only affect us, the persons we're serving, but ultimately it does affect the world.
So it's a beautiful thing, and a beautiful thing to learn, and a beautiful thing to keep in mind, that we can do that, and through an open heart, influence. Yeah. And so from that perspective, going back to kind of language matters, it matters a lot what we say to ourselves, right? And I want to remind to our listeners that what would I be without that question? What would I be with that? That's a beautiful thing to learn.
Absolutely.
Going back to what we learned during our wellness event, is there anything else you wish you would have shared? Kind of one more thing you wish we could have discussed with the group?
Yeah, there are a lot of things, but I'm going to pick a couple really quick. One of them is take a deep breath. Everybody right now, literally, put your feet flat on the floor, put your hands palm side up, rest them on your thighs, and take a deep breath in through your nose, noticing the cool air. And then exhale deeply and slowly through your mouth, noticing the warm air. And so I want to remind you to breathe. When you find yourself in the midst of translating, take a breath, shift the energy within you. But then I want to give you a couple of really quick tools if I can. Number one, I want to invite you to start writing gratitude letters. At the end of your day, ask yourself, what am I grateful for today? Now, some days are going to be really tough, but I invite you to review your day. And you're going to find something. It might be something simple like, oh, I just remembered when I needed help, our IT guy was right there to help me make that connection. I'm so grateful for that. When we cultivate an attitude of gratitude, it helps to raise our internal energy so that we're not living in the lower energies of some of the work that we find ourselves engaging in. And again, we can act as a conduit rather than a container. So every day before you go to bed, take a few moments and write a gratitude letter. I am so grateful that, and then fill it in, that the guy held the door for me today while I was holding those 6 cups of coffee for my colleagues. I'm so grateful that the judge called for a break. I'm so grateful that the nurse came in and brought the little patient a little treat. It made that patient smile and it shifted the atmosphere. I'm so grateful that I found a parking space just in time to make sure that I was in the room when I was supposed to be there. When we cultivate looking, not the same things every day. I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for the sunshine. No, this is the digging work of looking for places to be grateful for. There were two little boys they were twins. They were put in two rooms. One had this attitude that nothing ever worked out. They put him in a room with brand new toys. And he sit there and sifted through the toys and couldn't find anything he liked. And why wasn't there enough batteries? And they should have more pieces to play this game with. But they put his twin brother, the one who had a really good attitude, they put him in a room filled with horse manure. They closed the door on the two rooms. They saw the little boy with the bad attitude tearing up the toys, not finding anything that was pleasing to him. And they heard the little boy in the room with the horse manure throwing stuff against the wall, and they were wondering what was going on. When they opened the door, they asked him, "What's happening?" He said, "All this manure, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere." And so I'm saying to us to look for our ponies. Look for the things that we can be grateful for. Those things help to give us life. They help us to stay open-hearted. They help us to stay as containers for joy and light and love, rather than containers that can get contaminated. The last thing I want to encourage you to do is to do body scans. Take a few moments, breathe, imagine light coming into your nostrils, this brilliant, radiant light moving through the top of your head. Exhale, breathe in, see the light come down into your face. Exhale, breathe in, see it come into your neck. Exhale, breathe in, and work that light all the way through your body. And it's kind of like a cleansing. I encourage you, after every encounter you have as an interpreter, to have a cleansing practice. Maybe it's that you take 3 deep breaths and exhale out loud. Perhaps it's simply to say, I bless this experience with love. I shine light and love upon it, and I pray and believe to come out of it. But find some practices that you can engage in that disconnect you from the experience you've had. Even if you're going to be with those people again in a few hours or on the next day or next week, disconnect yourself in some way with some tangible practice. And I believe that you'll be able to stay open-hearted and present to this work in ways that are life-giving for those you serve and transformative for you as you serve.
So, Juanita, my last question, and thank you for these amazing, amazing wisdoms that I'm actually going to put in practice as well, breathe more and practice more. If we want to learn more from you, where can we find you?
Well, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook and Twitter. On Instagram, it's at Juanita Rasmus, JuanitaRasmus. And Facebook, it's Pastor Juanita Rasmus. And then Twitter, it's at Pastor_Rasmus. But if you forget all that, just go to JuanitaRasmus.com and you can email me, and my social media handles are on there as well. So follow me, join me. I try to put reminders for people from time to time about the things we've just talked about. That's part of the joy I have as being a spiritual director and helping to coach people through challenging moments and challenging times. So thanks so much for having me today. It's been such a pleasure.
Very grateful for having you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your love. And we're grateful, very grateful for everything that we have learned.
Thank you. Thank you. One last thing. Put your left hand over your right shoulder, your right hand over your left shoulder, and give yourself the best possible hug. I hope you got that. You're loved and you're valued. Thank you.
Thank you.